Clandestine time. You spent a couple hours with us before and you showed us some really cool charts and such. And I was hoping that we could talk first about the craze that's really, I feel, swept the globe. I mean, I'm getting pictures from all around the world, individuals that are either, just regular working 9 to 5 jobs, not really getting into these type of topics typically, but because of what they do, they've researched a lot with sky cams and stuff just on their time off basically, and they see these planets that have came in that they haven't seen before, that have been there now for just about a year. So when we talked before the show, you think that none of this stuff is really able to be accessible via view because it's being blocked or cloaked somehow with the government, correct?
Correct. They have the capabilities with lasers to cloak an object. They're like 30 years ahead of the public on where the technology is. I have a video on my YouTube chart. I think it's called Bonus 2 that shows at the end of it. It shows at present what laboratories are doing. Well, the government's about 30 years ahead of that, and they can cloak an object.
So they're cloaking these objects with lasers and stuff, but maybe there's certain times that technology isn't working good enough, so somebody's able to get a shot in and possibly pick something up. Do you think it's in our solar system right now?
Yes, without a doubt. Kepler's laws of planetary motion, and with our present knowledge of the model that the Chinese astronomers and the Korean and the Japanese astronomers gave us, it would take 16 years to reach the Earth if it was at the orbit of Neptune. It would take 16 years to reach us. So for it to arrive, I say, with the present effects that the Earth is having, I would say that it's no more than 5 years away, probably less than two. It may even show up this next each. But as we need to pay attention each March and April that's coming up, and because that's its exit point. And this time, the biblical record says that it's going to be the worst time in all of Earth history. So that since it only passed close to Earth 4 times in its past, um, the scriptural accounts is alluding to a very close passing of it again. So we should see it maybe, I would think that they'd let us see it anywhere from 30 to 90 days out, but the internet will be down. People probably won't be texting each other or sending pictures. They have to have control over the people. And one of the ways they're going to do it, when you see a bail-in or a rationing of money, which is what a bail-in is, then they'll ration food and then they'll ration fuel. If you got those three rationed, you have the control over the masses. And so they're much easier to deal with because they're basically dependent upon the government to give them food. And that's where they'll start volunteering people with the chip system, as the Bible talks about. And some people choose to use a credit card type chip. But the best way to handle that is to listen to the Bible. It says on the Sabbath and the Jubilee to store up 1 year of food and supplies. Therefore, you won't have to be bothered by standing in line during terrorism and probably diseases of different types, and not have to deal with that type of ordeal that's fixing to come up.
So you think that if you take the chip, you're just going to be given a fresh pass, basically like a golden ticket, and you can get through and food, access to other things, essentially, as long as you follow the playbook?
Exactly. Basically, you're going to have a certain amount of rations per month according to the card, and so you can't buy over that. That's how they're going to, limit who gets what type of food. Even though you have cash, well, they won't allow it probably because it's because they're not going to have enough food. When the bail-in happens, and shortly after that, maybe 3 or 4 months later, the economy crashes. Farmers can't get a loan to put seed in the ground. Manufacturers they may be laying off that are doing the canning and preparation of meats and vegetables. Um, you'd have a breakdown in the economy where the government would have to force people to go to work. And they have this all written out. They have a game, like a game book or FEMA that they plan on following. And
I
you better,
remember.
yeah.
I was just gonna. I didn't mean to interrupt there, Gil. I was just gonna jump in because when I was like 14, so this would have been over 20 years ago, I was warned about how eventually, when the government does clamp down to a one world system, the person that was telling me this, his mom was high in the FBI. She had some very prestigious positions with the Department of Defense, etc. And he was talking about the microchip and the roundups and the FEMA camps and how it was going to be Chinese and Soviets, etc. People not from this country, or UN troops, actually, what he called blue hats, that were going to round people up. But there wasn't a lot of talk about Nibiru or Planet X at the time. It was more just about the one world government. What I'm wondering is if this Planet X is going to cause just catastrophic events, and the Georgia Guidestones with the 500 million mark people, etc., maybe that's all connected there. And in order to usher that up, that's why they're going to use the UN troops and everything else, because they knew about this specific cataclysm years ago. Is that a possibility?
I don't know if they knew about it at that time. For sure, they knew about it around 92, maybe even earlier. But they had confirmation by the Pioneer and Voyager probes. If you turn on astronomy software and turn on where they went, and if you have the overlay of the Chinese on what their data shows, um, you can see how they triangulated the position of this object, and it's coming out of the constellation Sagittarius. That is actually south of the universe. And so they've been knowing about it since at least 1992. They had confirmation of it. And they've been preparing ever since. Now, I think we're within a couple years, maybe this next year. Don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell the future. I'm just saying that the signs that we're seeing on Earth tells me that this item has to be close. We're seeing the orbit of the moon on Saturn warped. We're seeing the orbit of our own moon stretched. It's called perturbations. That can only happen if you have an object that's fairly close. And put it this way: let's say if it's someone would say 16 years away. Well, if we have the effects of what we're seeing right now and it's 16 years away, I would hate to see it when it gets close, because it would be so severe that it doesn't have to pass close to us. But according to the past records, you can look in the biblical records as well as other places. You're going to see what's common is a 7-year drought, 7 years or longer. And you see that when it's mentioning double eclipse, that can't happen in the natural. That takes a third object to give you 2 eclipses in the same time period. Because the moon is what causes a solar eclipse, and then the sun and earth is what causes the moon to have an eclipse. You can't have them both at the same time. It's automatically describing they had to have a larger object that give you 3 hours of darkness, because the moon can only give you 7.3 minutes of darkness before the earth will roll out of the shadow, and it only covers only just a handful of countries. The outside secular records as well as the biblical records said the entire earth was darkened for 3 hours. The moon can't do that. That's geometrically it's impossible. The math does not work out. You can't build a model on that. And it just, remember what science is pertaining to astronomy. If you can take misobserved phenomena, bring it into laboratory and show that it's repeatable, that's science. And we have not just proving out the Chinese models, but we've proved out 14 incidents in the biblical records and 5 secular where we believe that it's passed. And there's mathematical evidence and as well as the sequence of events that people didn't have the knowledge of to fake. They didn't have the physics down. They didn't know that it could do this that level of events in that particular sequence of patterns. It's impossible for them to fake this. That's why when you find something that's fake, you can usually find an error in it, either in the science, the math, or something. When we use the proper science, which is the physics model, instead of the astronomy model, we're getting something that works out. That's running an exact match. And that gives us great concern because this object crosses Earth path twice, not once, twice. And it has roughly 150 to 152 day and separation between entry and exit. And the biblical records, which is a future event in Revelation, gives astounding information when you know how to process it on this next event. And
have you been able to figure out how many days and nights it's going to be total on the round trip?
You mean
so if we were to take both, coming past us, you said it's going to come past us twice with the orbit. How many days total would that be where it would cause?
Hold on.
Okay.
Yeah. The planet doesn't pass by us twice. Okay. It crosses Earth orbit twice. It's only by Earth one time, and that's in March, April event. The next, now it's on its way out. It's going out into deep space. 152 days later, Earth runs into the debris field of the second, wherever it came in at. The debris field that this thing going to leave behind will carry on for many years after. We will have sporadic meteor showers when we cross those 2 points again, multiple times in the future. But the most severe is the first 2 times that we cross. That's where the debris is either the largest or the most concentrated. Later on in years later, it gets lesser and smaller object, we hope. It's something that you can't exactly predict 100% on. And so it only passes near Earth once. Now it should be in the month of March or April, roughly 3.5 days after Passover, according to the biblical records on what we can tell what's going to happen here.
Is it going to cause some serious Earth displacement, and are we going to see sinkholes and such, very similar to the movie 2012?
Sinkholes would be the minor of your problems.
Okay, right. I'm sure you're right. What about? Let me ask you this, Gil. What about being on a big boat or something in the middle of the ocean or off the sound, Puget Sound somewhere? So when everything hits the fan, you've got an opportunity to kind of just, or a submarine or something.
Look, there's huge currents underneath the ocean as well. Just because the waves are rolling on the top doesn't mean you're not bouncing up and down on the bottom. That's a false. You can talk to any submariner. He'll tell you that it's also sometimes a rough ride underneath, especially when you go in those thermal planes. It really gets to be a wild ride. You'd have less wave action like in the middle of the Pacific, opposite of Jerusalem area. That's probably where the least waves would be. But I wouldn't risk it. I would choose something like either the Persian Gulf or the Mediterranean. Would have a better chance of surviving if you're in the middle of it, not at the shoreline. Because even those we will have a sloshing effect in the Mediterranean, because the Bible even says names three major towns on the Israeli coast, as well as the Nile area being wiped out. So you're going to have some tidal problems in the Mediterranean, but it won't be as severe as the oceans. The oceans, you're looking at waves that we've never seen normally. Every so often, when a large ship hits what's called a freak wave, sometimes they'll snap the ship in half, because the gaps between the waves and the height of it causes too much stress in the middle of the hull, and the steel structure can't handle multiple hits like that. So even your larger ships will snap in half. The Bible talks about 1/3 of all the ships being destroyed. It talks about 1/3 of all of the trees and grass, and even the rivers and all of your fresh water above ground is going to be toxic. When meteors are made of material that can render fresh water not drinkable, at least for a month or two, until it settles out. And not counting the problems that we will have with all of the nuclear facilities not having fuel, or their cooling water, or their water in their rivers evacuate. Therefore, they don't. It only takes a few hours before a meltdown will start, and be completely melted down within 8 to 12 hours later. It doesn't take long. And then after that, it'll make hydrogen, and then the top will blow off, just like it did in Fukushima. Right. We're looking at and that ain't counting all of the majority of the volcanoes going off. That's not counting when the half of the Earth that's facing the plasma of this comet tail, that's like a constant EMP wave hitting that side of the Earth. Chances of any electronics working after that are slim to none. So you're looking at no possible way of drawing water out of the ground unless it's manual. And chances are your water wells that you dug, the pipes that you use to dig the well will be sheared because of the shifting of the crust. We're brought back to the Stone Age, basically. And with most of the grass and trees burnt, you don't have any animals, hardly. Most of the animals are gone. And if the grass is gone, that meant a lot of the animals will starve to death. And so it says people will wish death for 5 months before death comes, which is the second event. 152 and 1/8 days later, there'll be a second meteor shower. That one will come from the nighttime side. The one in March is on the daytime side, after a 12-hour delay in Earth's rotation on March. There will be no rotational delay in the end of August or the beginning of September, depending on which month that it enters in. And that one's, we're going to be, according to we may be hit by 2 meteors, because the text is a little vague. It seems like it might be mentioned 2, but at least one of those is going to be the size of a mountain. And it will hit Earth so hard that Earth will wobble like a drunkard. Keep in mind, how would they get that correct in a way of, like, that's almost like a satellite view. Remember, he's not saying a hut in their village will shake. He's saying the whole Earth will shake like a hut. All right? uh, which is realistic in a model if you get hit by that large of a meteor coming in at about 8 to 10 times a rifle bullet, the speed
Right.
of a rifle bullet. It says it splits the earth. Uh, the sea shall that sea that it hits, or ocean, will boil. 1/3 of the sea life shall die. 1/3 of the ships will gone. That's not counting all the people that lives on the coastline of the Pacific and Indian Ocean. Uh, the Bible clearly says that this is the worst time in all of Earth's history. Noah's flood happened, and that's not the worst. This next time is.
Well,
That's a pretty bold. That is a pretty bold statement.
and also in the Bible, doesn't it say the second time that God decides to cleanse the earth, it's not going to be with water, it's going to be with fire, correct?
Yes, yes, because well, that's what happens. Only half of the Earth can go through a meteor shower at any given time. The other half is protected because you're on a globe, a sphere.
You mean the earth
And
isn't flat, Gil?
well, I'm afraid not.
I'm sorry, I had to throw that out there.
Oh yeah, I've been bombarded by people, and then I give them one picture, which I pull from their videos, and I tell them, well, the guy didn't calculate e- elevation. Go measure the elevation of the Sears Tower and the elevation on where he took the picture from. Say it actually proves that the Earth has a curvature to it. Otherwise, you'd see that all of Chicago plus 650 feet of terrain underneath it. If the Earth was actually flat, and then they want to jump to some other subject. I said, first you got to answer my question, prove me wrong, and so that pretty much ends the conversation there. When you give them something solid that they can't.
Don't have anywhere to go.
Exactly. So people are being misguided, whether it's intentional or not. Uh, if you don't have all of the facts, you get wrong results. It's just like a computer. You put wrong data in, you're going to get wrong results out. It's no different than a calculator or anything else. And that's what most of these people with the flat earth theory is doing. Uh, it, it's not valid.
It's a fascinating phenomenon, though, to watch so many people, go to bat, defending it, saying that it was in the Bible or it was written about, and it's a slave planet. And it's just fascinating to see how many people can be taken on a lemmings ride. It's very interesting. I wonder. Let me ask you: do you think that there was something behind the scenes that kind of pushed that? Maybe a mind control op, kind of like a Tavistock Institute, or some type of CIA tactic, MK Ultra stuff from the past that's now refined to divert attention somewhere? Do you think that it was just a theory that somebody came up with again, and because it was fresh and new and the way that the internet is, that kind of made a life of its own?
You heard of Christendom, haven't you?
Fresh my memory, if you would, please.
That's a blend of Islam and Christianity called Christendom.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, the Muslims believe in a flat earth in the Quran. And a lot of people are buying into this. Look, there is an agenda out there. And people need to get a deeper education before they jump onto the wagon of anything. Put your skepticism up. I did. I was a hardened skeptic on this planet. You have to, since nobody out there could prove to me that the planet was real, I did a search. I said, okay, if it did exist, it would be in the Chinese records. And to my surprise, it was. And then I had to try to find Achilles' heel to eliminate it, because I really didn't like the results. And I couldn't. The more I went, the further and deeper the data was there.
How old are those records, Gil?
Oh, the Chinese records go back over 4,000 years.
Okay.
See, most of the other ones they pulled, you only have fragments that they saw something large, a large comet that's called. They blamed it for the plagues, And remember, plagues at that time is more than just disease. And but the last time it passed in the Chinese records, it's in 1054. That's only about 960 years ago. Therefore, you can't have a 3,600-year orbit. Matter of fact, you can go back and almost plot it. If we had to put a time to it, it's closer to 360, but it has a erratic orbit. That's why it was hard to track. And if it wouldn't be for the biblical stories, we could not have plotted that. And it plots out following a formula, as it says, well, whenever it had a collision with Ceres, it only came back in 54 to 52 years. And then after that was like 130 something years, and so on and so on. It was a perfect amount of time if you use a formula, just like we use when we send a space probe, when it's running out of speed, we'll let it go around a planet about 3 or 4 times where it reaches its maximum speed, and then we dart it out to a planet. Well, that's exactly what this planet did. It had to go 4 times around the sun before it came back to its original roughly 360-year orbit. They couldn't have guessed that the way they did, the way the events were timed apart. Can't do it. They didn't have the knowledge to better write a fictional story to match it. So
You've got an image that you showed me a moment before the presentation that has a path that shows how Nibiru will pass by the sun and then go past the Earth. And a lot of people don't really have a reference point for what the orbit of it is, and because that's one of the things I read a lot in different comments, not only on my channel but others out there like Steve Olson, your channel as well. They'll say, well, how come Nibiru's over here by Jupiter? How come it's close to the sun? I don't think there's really an idea in some people's minds where it's actually coming from and where it's going. Could you show us that picture that has it with that path coming close to the Earth?
all right, give me just a second here.
Sure, absolutely. Because I think that just is important for people, that give them a better understanding. And, because that's one of the things I talked to you about before the show also, is I wanted to get into, with all the thousands of photographs that I've got from people that are all around the world, whether it be from webcams in Mexico, skycams in Hawaii or Georgia, all over the place. And there's these just incredible anomalies. And I think that 90-something% of them are, probably you can call off as lens flare or some type of just regular anomaly. But there's a few of them there, Gil, that look pretty incredible.
Yeah, keep in mind, if it's going to be about equal to our sun, or you able to see this right here?
No, this is good. Thank you.
So you can see it or you can't?
Oh, I can see it now. I thought you asked if I've ever seen it before. I could see it perfectly.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Let's see. Wait, let me move on to this one right here. Okay, you able to see my pointer, correct? That I have on the screen?
I can see the cursor. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, cursor. Okay. See, it enters around this area here on Earth path, a path, and then it circles the sun, and it comes out about here, exiting. Now, this is where March is at. March, April.
Okay.
Scenario here. Okay.
Okay.
And then now the planet is heading outward. So now Earth is going to travel 150 days, which is 152 and a half, 152 and 1/8 days later. Now it runs into the debris field, which is left over. Okay. So every time Earth is going to come around in these 2 months right here, there's going to be lingering debris that will rain on Earth a little bit. It shouldn't be as bad as these first 2 events, but it can be sizable. We just don't know, but it should get less and less. But these first 2 events are going to be some extreme events. And there's some people that says that they're reading the zodiac, like September would be a day. See, this is March, April. September is exactly opposite of that. Whenever you're reading the zodiac, Virgo's over here, uh,
Okay.
which is, you see, behind the sun whenever you're looking from September. That's why you can't see the stars because the sun is out. So that's why you have to turn to the zodiac charts to better see this from September. That is the occult version. It's 180 degrees out of sync with the Hebrew Mezorah, which is the Mezorah you use in March, and you look at the nighttime sky. Right here, the sun is opposite of the earth, and you can see Virgo in the nighttime sky. But if you go over here on September, well, the sun is in front of you before you can see Virgo. So you have to turn to charts and software. That's not the way the biblical writings teach us, and this is exactly the opposite, which is the occult. And that's why September is not the month we look in. We look in March and April is where Virgo is in the nighttime sky.
Okay.
So sometime in the future, one of these March or April, and this is also the Chinese, this is the overlay from the Chinese, the Asian astronomers, not just the Chinese, but the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese astronomers that gave us enough information where we can plot a segment of its course. When we do this overlay through the biblical records, we get an exact match to the events. And in the text, it even states that, like for Solomon, where we can plot a segment of his course. When we do this overlay through the biblical records, we get an exact match to the events. And in the text, it even states that, like for Solomon and Gomorrah, it mentions that Lot was feeding them unleavened bread. That's during the week of Passover. Guess what? That's March, April. Yeshua was crucified when? March or April. It goes on and on multiple times. So for this to pass by to cause it 3 days of darkness, where does Earth have to be? March or April. You see?
That's a good connection there.
Yeah, the data points. I'm not making a shallow observation. The data points us there. That's why I'm holding to the data. Let's see. Me give you. Let's see.
Now the Chinese call it the red dragon. The Hopis call it the red Kachina. There's been some very powerful red sunrise or sunsets as well lately. Have you noticed more than usual?
Well, it all depends on how much CO2 is in the air.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's the reason why you get these different colors.
It's not the tail of the dragon.
No, I'm afraid not.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Thank goodness it's not, right?
Yeah. But it will be one time in the future here that will be startling. I'm trying to find a Yeshua sacrifice here, which you see right here. Let me show you this here event. Remember Jonah we had talked about, we touched on?
Yes.
Jonah gave a 40-day warning to Nineveh. Well, from 40 days to where it crosses March or April, this is where it would be behind the sun. But Earth would be over here at the 40-day mark. You can clearly see it. And see, it would have been Jonah is giving his warning in February and in February, March era, and you can clearly see the I lost our.
Showing me something here, and then
yeah, we have a clear view to see it when Jonah was looking at it at the 40-day mark.
Okay.
Now, if you had an object, remember everything we've seen in the sky pretty much is basically equal to the same size of the sun. All right, because it's called a sundog.
Okay.
For it to be equal, remember the moon and the sun are basically yeah, the sun and the moon is basically the same size visually to us. Okay.
Okay.
Well, our our calculations gives us that this planet is somewhere between 6 and 7.5 diameters. All right, larger than Earth.
Okay.
Well, if it's 7 days away from Earth, it should be about 50% the size of the moon or size of the sun. When it gets to about 2 days away, then it's about almost 3.5 times the diameter of the moon. So for it to be equal to the sun, that meant it's somewhere between these two numbers, about between 4 and 5 days away. If you see an object that's almost equal to the sun, that means it should have been here already. Um, because it's a sundog. A mirage looks real, and that's what a sundog is. Under the right atmosphere con conditions, can be seen anywhere. Okay,
Okay.
and it's just a phenomenon. It's called a sundog. You can go to Wikipedia and type in sundog. You see a certain amount of varieties that they show, but there's many more than that. And that's what, when people are not familiar with this is what they're seeing. Uh,
Well, and
and
that's
then
why a lot of times you'll see that, I guess it's a sundog, as you say, where there's another sun next to the one that's our typical sun, and it looks almost identical to it, and you're like, well, how does that work? There's one that's the exact same size, or it's a certain distance to where it looks exactly like that. So those, I think, are pretty easy to dismiss. But I've heard different versions of what a sundog actually is. So, and I'm looking at this chart, and I got to say, Gil, let's just imagine that this happens within the next couple of years. We're looking, okay, day 7, 50% the size of the moon. Day 2, I mean, the further out you get, it gets so big that it's going to freak people out if people don't have a spiritual connection somewhere. I mean,
you have
wow.
to have both. You have to have also the knowledge of the physics on what to expect, and not to be scared, and know where to be. Matter of fact, the Bible tells us where to be. He gives us the pivot point. It's going to be somewhere near Jerusalem, because he tells you in Joel chapter 2, verse 30 to 32, he says, all the ones that call on my name, Yahovah, who are in Jerusalem on Mount Zion, I shall deliver as I promised to them. And he's going to bring them to a place of safety in the
How
wilderness.
how big is Mount Zion?
Well, since most people will be on the ground or hiding in the rocks, caves, whatever, you're looking at probably, it already tells us only a remnant is going to heed his word. So you're looking at maybe 1.5 million people
Jeez, that's worse than New
going
York
there.
City.
Yeah,
That's gonna be pretty packed.
and then about 40% of those people won't make it, because remember, they knock on the door, the place of safety, calling him by the name they think is his name, and he answers them. He says, "Go away, I don't know you." Now, those are not pagan. Those are not pagan people or other people that knocking on his door, asking to be let in. Those are people that are just misguided. They didn't have the right information, and about 40% will be not in the right place at the right time. And so he's keep in mind, the data in the biblical says there's two taking aways, and they shouldn't be defined and grouped together, because they're qualified completely different. The first one, it's only a remnant, and it specifically says a place and a time to be there, and you're brought to the wilderness. Well, the second taking away, you can be anywhere in the world, and the dead are first, then the living, and then you go to heaven. Well, the first one, it doesn't mention anything about the dead. It says only the living go into the place in the wilderness, and it's only a remnant. Well, the second one says everybody's taken. Now, you either try to combine a contradiction, or it's two separate events. And it's clearly marking two separate events. One is at the beginning of the Great Tribulation, and one is at the end. And he says, if you make it to the end of this without being in a place of safety, and you make it, count yourself lucky. Very few you will. Because Islam is going to dominate the world pretty much, except for that small little place called Israel. And the last battle that they're going to suffer, they're going to lose 3/4 of their northern territory. And they'll be pushed to the Negev desert, and that's when the two prophets die. And that's when the Muslims stop, because they're celebrating the death of the two prophets. Well, that gives the remnant that's pushed to the desert to fall to their knees and pray for the Messiah to come. And he comes 3.5 days later, or three days later. And he, if you want to call that rapturing or whatever you want, the dead are first, then the living. So the two prophets are lifted up, plus the other dead, and then the living. How often did Yeshua say, you've heard it said this, but it is written this way? He's trying to say sometimes you hear things that it's not written that way. And he said that multiple times. And go back and read what it literally says. You got to go back to the Hebrew and read what the Hebrew is saying, because there's some contradictions that's not following us exact. And I didn't believe that until I found it myself. There's the science in the Hebrew is absolutely correct. We have some problems with the English translations.
So that means that when this thing comes back around the second time, that everybody's gone. It's going to take out everybody.
No, that's only 150 days later. The end of the Great Tribulation. This starts the Great Tribulation.
Okay.
And the Great Tribulation is a total of 3.5 years. And but this is going to, remember how it even says the army that attacks Israel will also be on horseback. Well, an EMP wave, wouldn't that put people on horseback for the most part?
It certainly could do that, yeah.
You still have some military equipment which is shielded by EMP, but not all of it. So you're going to have limited modern weapons, but in other words, you won't have enough for a 1,000,000-man army like the Bible says. They're going to be on horses. Just like it says, it talks about oil lamps. That's not a misprint. Okay, we're going to be burning oil lamps again.
You're taking this literal then?
It's backing up by the science.
Okay.
If you have an EMP, what sort of how long do you think it's going to take to replace flashlights that are most
Who knows?
Flashlights today
Well,
are electronic because they're LED.
Well, I mean, let me add this real quick, Gil. You bring up a good point, because there was a conversation I was having the other day with somebody about their smartphone. And he goes, man, these things are made by aliens, I'm telling you. And he was joking around. I'm like, okay, whatever, dude. And he goes, okay, Rex, go find somebody that could build this phone right now. There's, good luck finding someone to put that thing together. Maybe, in the factories out there in China, but do they know how to make the microchips?
Well, exactly. I mean, just look at a car, a few million parts, okay? If you have one vendor that's out of that car stops. If it's a major part. That meant it doesn't matter how many other manufacturers you have working, it just takes one to stop it. And it's the same thing with your cell phones and a bunch of other things. A lot of our electrical power plants will be out of commission because of the electronics are going to be bad. And
well, they won't be able to stay cold too, because they've got to have a certain cooling system in order, otherwise, like you said, they just blow up.
Well, that's pertaining to the nuclear power plants that are facing the comet tail, because that comet tail is plasma, and it's going to weaken our magnetic field, and that plasma is probably going to, remember, it says where the sun is 7 times hotter than normal.
Jeez.
because of the atmosphere, the protective atmosphere is temporarily removed from that side of the Earth, and so you're getting hit by a pretty a large amount of radiation, basically, of plasma, and it's going to fry some electronics. It's going to kill a lot of plant life. It's going to, if you're in the open to it, if you're not shielded in a cave or underground facility or some concrete structure, you could get sick from the exposure. And then it's going to be look, I take it literally when it says the worst time in all of Earth's history, because it matches scientifically. You can see it. If these events happen, if we go through it, because the data points in the Bible are a repeat event. Knowing what took place in the Old Testament gives you the data to figure out the last book of the Bible. We didn't have that before. And remember how it says the 4 angels hold back the wind? Well, that's the way they would say that the earth stopped rotating. Doesn't it? You know, it says where the wise version have 2 portions of oil. Well, 1 portion is for a 12-hour night. The wise have 2 portions to burn through twice as long of a night, because because Jerusalem side is going to be in the dark for additional 12 hours. The North and South America is going to have 12 hours of additional light because of the rotational delay. And these are 2 stories. Joshua's long day and these other ones are almost 3,000 years apart.
Right.
Well, they were written closer to 1,000 years apart, because that was written. Revelation was written only 2,000 years ago, and Joshua was about 3,000. So, but it's giving us the information for this next event, which is predicting the future, if you wish to call it, in exact models that we can reproduce. Remember what science is. You can take the data and reproduce a active model which came from the Chinese as well as the biblical records, and it matches. I tend to lean on it pretty strong. It's you can't guess this. They didn't have it. They didn't have the physics. They didn't know how the universe worked yet. It's just impossible for them to get this correct.
And if you think about some of the pauses in technology, or resets, I should say, you know, there's been so many times in history where these civilizations seem to be in a thriving moment and then they just disappear, or they don't necessarily disappear, but their civilization falls very quick. And some of the plagues and such that you brought up that are possibly connected to Wormwood or Planet X or Nemesis, it brings up some really thought-provoking ideas. And, you know, I keep looking at this chart, Gil, and I'm telling you, man, this is, if it's 50 times the size of the moon, I mean, and somebody sees that.
Visual perspective. Yes, that's your visual perspective. That means that roughly, if it's this size that we're claiming, let me show you some data here. You can go ahead and I have to find it for you. Right here. So you have 250,000 miles between the Earth right here and the moon right here. 250,000. Well, that's roughly 30 diameters of Earth. You can fit 30 Earths between the moon and Earth again, okay? This object's only 7 times, roughly 6 to 7 times the diameter. And the Roche limit, which is this halo that I have around Earth, which is 1.5 times the diameter or radius of Earth, is the Roche limit. That's the limit of gravity. Anything beyond that is the magnetic fields that's holding things in place. This is where you get geosynchronous orbit after the Roche limit. Well, this has the similar mass or electromagnetic field, which we don't know what it is. I'm just doing a parallel. I'm giving it equal
Sure.
1.5 times this radius. Well, you see this halo, so it won't drag us into outer space unless it gets closer than halfway. It'd have to get considerably close, and it could, because
And
it says this next one is the worst time in all of Earth's history.
so this thing could
And
actually drag us out somewhere different into the solar system, you're saying?
if it came close enough to where it got into the gravity fields, yes. If the two gravity fields crossed long enough, yes, it could drag. Remember Hezekiah?
No.
When the shadow went backwards on Hezekiah? Well, this is what took place. It drug us slightly. Hold on. Let me get the data here for you.
That'd be an interesting adventure, catching a ride with a giant planet. Now, there's also a lot of speculation that there's various moons that orbit several planets, and then the red Kachina, the planet 7X you call it, is this dwarf star. So that is that the dwarf star, or is that like a planet itself?
I think our books are going to have to be rewritten. Um, I don't believe planets can be anything close to what a star is. It's not that they had enough um, gravitational pull and mass to ignite its own atmosphere. I
Okay.
don't believe a sun even works in that way. I think it works on a different method of plasma. Plasma comes into the north and south pole, and it radiates out from its axis of its center across these planets, and that's called the solar winds. So I just don't see that happening with a planet that just happens to have more mass. I, I think we have to. So I don't buy into this brown dwarf theory because of, you see, in light of what the physicists have come up with.
And you think it's just one planet then?
Yes, it may have a few moons, but there's no data to support that. But I have no answer for that 12th star on Leo, not
Okay.
until it shows up. It may have a small fragment of a moon that which might make up that 12th star for Leo. Now, you see, this drawing I have in front. This is Hezekiah.
Okay. Uh huh.
All right. Well, this is where there's a discrepancy between the English and the Hebrew. The English says it was a sundial that went backwards 10 degrees. In the Hebrew, literally, it states that it went back on steps. Okay, let's see if I can find it here. Um, See, this is the King James going down
Okay.
in the dial of Azar, which people thought it was like a sundial, but right here in the Hebrew, stairs, it's steps right here, steps. Okay, and there's the shadow that went back on steps. Well, um, so if it's a sundial, it's east to west. That the Earth would have to stop on it. It would have to stop on a dime, means reverse, stop on a dime again, and go back to its original time because there was no delay of hours at the end of the day. Well, that would empty out all of the oceans onto the continent, and he doesn't even state that in the document at all. So if we go literally what it says, if it's steps and you face the steps south, okay, then that's a tilt of the Earth to 26 to 28 degrees. It's a north-south tilt right here. If you have shadow on the steps, which this you can tell the seasons on where the shadow is on the steps, okay, and you can go 10 steps, and guess what? That gives you 26 to 28 degree tilt. We can prove that Earth tilted between 3 to 4 times in its past of this exact amount. So it passed so close to Earth, it causes to have a tilt because it's like two bar magnets, opposite poles attract, and they tilted towards each other. Okay, And it takes about 6 hours for its approach to do that. And as it's leaving, it takes 6 hours for it to straighten out roughly again. And it comes close to its original position. It could be anywhere from 3 to 7 degrees off. And that's what caused some of these mini ice ages before, because our seasonal changes are caused by Earth's tilt, not by how close we are from the sun. Because North America, remember, when we're having winter, Miss Australia is having summer because of the tilt.
Now, that's another thing, too, is I've heard that because the Earth has moved off of its axis and the poles have shifted somewhat because of this giant anomaly out in the heavens, Planet X, Wormwood, Nibiru, whatever name you want to put to it, some areas are a lot more extreme. You're going to have a lot more sun and heat in specific areas that didn't have that type of temperature years ago, but then other parts of the world are more cold, and there's ice that's, more ice there now than there was 10 years ago.
Remember those mammoths that got frozen?
Yes.
Where the food was still in their mouth. They didn't have time even to swallow the food they had in their mouth. They were flash frozen because of the tilt. Cold winds from the Arctic. Before they knew it, within 6 hours, they were in the, within a short time, that cold, freezing wind hit them, and you're frozen. And this is an archaeological find of Hezekiah's seal that was just found recently. It shows a winged disc right here. The wings represent movement through the sky. The disc is our planet. And the writing on here says, belonging to Hezekiah, son of Asher, king of Judah. And this is one of the only seals that was ever found for Hezekiah. Hezekiah, you see, documented this event on his seal because it was the way God answered his prayer. He wanted to know, he wanted proof that he was going to live another 15 years, as the prophet told him. He says, well, what do you want? You want the shadow to go forward or backwards? He says, make it go backwards, because that's basically it's impossible. And God tilted the earth and made the shadow go backwards. And that's how he got his answer.
You know what this looks like? This is similar to some of those hieroglyphs in Egypt, also the Anunnaki symbols from the Sumerian tablets that they talk about, the return of Planet X or whatever. They had the interesting similarities there.
Yeah, many cultures have put a flying disc because they're describing this object. Now, they'll give it different names because they didn't have word planet or anything like that. See, we even give it a name. I did. Planet 7X. It has multiple names. It's called Baal. It's called Jupiter. It's called Zeus. It's called Horus. It's called multiple pagan gods. Because that's what it caused so much destruction. They were sacrificing young babies even under Baal worship. Because of the severe drought, they would sacrifice children for this planet to give them their weather back.
Gil, they're building 1,000 of those temples right now around the world.
Yep.
You think there's a connection there?
Yeah. The adversaries are the one, the fallen angels are, the Bible calls them, Elohim does not mean God, it means authority figure. Okay? It says these are the authority figures that's put on, they're the ones pulling the strings behind the scenes. And they're going to try, from what I understand, remember Von Braun of NASA told his secretary great details on what they were going to do in the future. And one of them is that they were going to mimic alien, crafts coming down as being friendly, giving us high-tech stuff. And that was one of the things that they were going to try to fool the public with. And he was letting his secretary know about this. You see this view right here that I have here on the screen?
Yes.
See, this planet can either pass to the right or to the left of Earth. See, if this planet would have passed to the right of Earth, then Earth would have also tilted, but also go through the meteor shower, the you see debris field. But because it passed on the left side of Earth, Earth didn't go through the plasma tail, so there was no rotational delay. So Earth tilted as it was still spinning. Okay, so there was no and there was no meteor shower, but there was a meteor shower 5 months later, because there was an army parked outside of let me see, Jerusalem, ready to invade, and Hezekiah was worried about his own life also at the time, and he put up a bunch of defenses. Well, the king of the Assyrians marched his army there. I think it was 185,000 soldiers. And they went to sleep to get up the following morning to go to battle. When the king woke up the following morning, all of his soldiers were dead. And there's some other outside documents I have in here, right here, I have it written, where some writers had figured it was fire from heaven that had killed him. So 5 months later is where Earth passes through the second meteor shower.
Jeez.
So it wiped out that army. The timing here is incredible. Only God can create the timing. So,
what's your thought on Zecharia Sitchin and the Anunnaki?
I'm not cutting down the man in any kind of way, but I'm looking for hard data. He has stories coming from the clay tablets, but there's no way of substantiating the claim with hard data. The Chinese gives us an orbital path of it. It says where it was in the sky, exact time, dates, and places.
What's the name of those documents, Gil?
All right.
Just so our listeners could look it up, because I know that people are going to ask me that after this if I don't give them a reference point.
Sure. It's one of the main one is the evaluation of Eastern and Western records of the supernova of 1054. And there are some other ones that are free. Let me see. Let me get this up here.